In my last couple of videos, I've been covering the poppies venerated by the UK at the suggestion of a commenter who pointed out that they were used in a ritual for Armistice Day at the Tower of London. I said that poppies are symbolic in the occult, opium is derived from poppies, and the opium trade helped to expand the British Empire through the British East India Company. And perhaps these are the reasons poppies are venerated by the British royalty, especially at the expansion of the empire, but at the expense of many lost and ruined lives through addiction to this powerful drug. A commenter asked me to focus on the British East India Company and the opium trade. I remembered that opium is one of the drugs used by the Scythians. They combined it with psychedelics in the blood of their enemies for their rituals. The Scythians are part of the royal bloodline genealogy, so opium as a drug had been known in antiquity by the bloodliners. Prior to opioids being introduced by the medical and pharmacia mafia, they were propagated throughout the world by the bloodline Nephilim via the British East India Company and the CIA. The British East India Company was incorporated by royal charter in 1600 by Queen Elizabeth I and originally chartered as the Governor and Company of Merchants of London trading to the East Indies. In 1577, Sir Francis Drake set out on an expedition from England to plunder Spanish settlements in South America in search of gold and silver. Sir Francis Drake was born in Tavistock Parish, and he has a statue there. Francis is a Frankish Merovingian name, and Drake means dragon. This is just a reminder that Vlad Dracul was a Scythian, and King Charles traces his lineage back that way. Drake eventually also sailed to the East Indies. Drake, along with Sir Thomas Smith, a powerful London politician and administrator, proponent of British colonization of the Americas, and other seafarers who had served with Drake and Sir Walter Raleigh, were part of the charter of the Company of Merchants of London, trading to the East Indies, or the British East India Company. The charter named Sir Thomas Smith as the first governor of the East India Company. Sir Thomas Smith was an English merchant, politician, and colonial administrator who financed Elizabethan-era trade ventures to the New World, the Americas. He obtained settlement rights to the Virginia colony in 1592, and he was treasurer of the Virginia Company for expansion of tobacco plantations and the displacements of natives in America. But he was also the first governor of the British East India Company. Sir James Lancaster commanded the first East India Company voyage in 1601 aboard a ship called the Red Dragon. The Red Dragon. The East India Company used the Red Dragon for at least 5 voyages to the East Indies. The first recorded non-European performance of the play Hamlet took place on the Red Dragon. So here you have all these pirates and knights of the crown sailing around, being entertained by Shakespearean plays and looking for drugs to sell. Pirate drug dealer knights. Hamlet's character from Shakespeare is a Danish prince of Denmark, Amleth, a Viking prince whose god is Odin. So a pirate. Speaking of the Red Dragon and pirates, in the movie From Hell, starring Johnny Depp as the detective on the trail of Jack the Ripper in London in the 1800s, Johnny Depp's character is a heroin addict who frequents an opium den run by the Chinese, and he calls that chasing the dragon. In that movie, the narrative is that a Freemason was Jack the Ripper. I'll play a clip from the opium scene in the movie now.
Never thought you'd make me perspire. Never thought I'd do you the same. Never thought I'd fill with desire. Never thought I'd feel so ashamed.
So, in March 1604, Sir Henry Middleton commanded the company's second voyage, and so on. These are all Knights of the Crown. The high profits reported by the company after landing in India prompted James I to grant an indefinite charter to the British East India Company. That's King James of the King James Bible, a Stuart bloodliner. The British East India Company began using and transporting slaves in Asia and the Atlantic in the early 1620s. And that slave trade only ended in 1834 after the discovery that various ships had contained evidence of the illegal slave trade. The British began trading with China in 1699. The company started selling opium to Chinese merchants in the 1770s in exchange for goods like porcelain tea, causing a series of opioid addiction outbreaks across China in 1820s. The ruling Qing dynasty outlawed the opium trade in 1796, but the British merchants continued illegally nonetheless. The Qing dynasty took measures to prevent the East India Company from selling opium, which led to the First Opium War in 1839, which involved a succession of British naval attacks along the Chinese coast over the course of several months. The Qing were forced to give British merchants special treatment and the right to sell opium. The Chinese also ceded territory to the British, including the island of Hong Kong. The prosperity that the officers of the company enjoyed allowed them to return to Britain and establish sprawling estates and businesses to obtain political power, such as seats in the House of Commons. With the advent of the Industrial Revolution, Britain surged ahead of its European rivals. Demand for Indian commodities was boosted by the need to sustain troops and the economy during the war. As home to the Revolution, Britain experienced higher standards of living. Its ever-growing cycle of prosperity, demand, and production had a profound influence on overseas trade. The company became the single largest player in the British global market and rose to account for half of the world's trade during the mid-1700s and early 1800s, particularly in basic commodities including opium. It evolved into a significant political and military entity, controlling vast territories of India before its supposed dissolution in 1874. The company also ruled the beginnings of the British Empire in India. India officially became a Commonwealth nation in 1947. So for the British Empire, the British East India Company advanced trade, gained them control of large parts of India, included Hong Kong. They became a military power, larger than the British Army at times, to protect its interests and expand its influence. Politically, it acted as an agent of British imperialism in India. People involved in British East India Company were usually Knights of the Crown. I will review some of those people now. Elihu Yale, who Yale University is named for. He worked for the British East India Company starting in 1670. Yale amassed a fortune while working for the company, largely through secret contracts with Madras merchants. He was also involved in the slave trade of children. Yale is from Wales and descended from many of the royal houses of Britain, including the Plantagenets and the Tudors. This is his family crest, and it has a blue boar at the top, which is a Druidic symbol, same as the Scythian boars and the one on Camilla's heraldry. It also has the knight iconography and the little ermine spots on it. See my video titled "The Devil Wears Ermine." He became a diamond merchant and the large diamonds on some of the crown jewels were obtained by Elihu Yale. So that's who financed the founding of Yale University. A crooked Welsh witch, a bloodliner, a pirate. And then they established their witch pirate club to help control the U.S. Skull and Bones. The next is Sir Henry Rawlinson, whose most honorable Order of the Bath, Fellowship of the Royal Society, Imperial Order of the Lion and the Sun. He was an officer of the British East India Company Army assigned to Iran and close associate to Lionel Rothschild, Cecil Rhodes, and Alfred Milner. He also became a senior commander in the British Army during World War I. This is the guy who's named as Father of Assyriology. He's the discoverer, supposedly, of the key to the ancient Persian, Babylonian, and Assyrian inscriptions in the cuneiform. He supposedly unearthed more than 30 tons of stone statues and cuneiform tablets from the Babylonian era, Sumerian, Assyrian, Anunnaki, ring lords, and winged genies, which were supposedly lost or stolen in the Kurnow disaster. They just disappeared by way of circumstance, either via shipwreck or pirates or looting or whichever story you pick. But luckily for the crown, Sir Rawlinson read them prior to that disappearance, and in doing so, he's the only one who can interpret the true lineage of King Darius. And this one has Ahura Mazda and giants and priests and even an elf-looking guy with a pointy hat like Santa Claus. In 1855, upon his return to England from Iran, Sir Henry Rawlinson was appointed a Crown Director of the East India Company. I did a video about him in the Kurnow disaster. John Jacob Astor in 1784 came to America after living in London, where he owned a flute-making business. Upon arrival, he joined the Masonic Lodge in New York and became a master after only a couple years. He was the first multi-millionaire businessman in the U.S. and one of the wealthiest people in history, they say. The Astor family achieved prominence in business, society, and politics in the U.S. and the U.K. during the 19th and 20th centuries, and in New York, he was a merchant in opium and fur and pianos and real estate. After moving to New York, he married Sarah Cox, who was also his consultant, and she was accused of witchcraft after her success with the company in 1817. The Isle of Lewis is an island off the coast of northern Scotland with Norse Gaelic origins, which was once owned by the MacLeod clan. Trump is a MacLeod on his mother's side. The island is home to the Druidic Callanish stone circle, which are mythically petrified giants, according to legend, who could not convert to Christianity. On midsummer morning, an entity known as the Shining One walks the length of the avenue, they say. In 1844, the Isle of Lewis was bought by a British knight, Sir James Matheson, who was Fellowship of the Royal Society and co-founder of Jardine Matheson Company. Jardine Matheson was founded in 1832 by William Jardine and James Matheson to traffic opium in Asia, while also trading cotton, tea, silk, and a variety of other goods. In 1844, the firm established its head office in the new British colony of Hong Kong and then proceeded to expand along the China coast. Sir James Matheson bought the entire Isle of Lewis and built a castle there with his fortune in the Chinese opium trade. James Matheson then sold it to another British royal, Lord Leverhulme, who started an industrial soap company, and then it was used for World War II by the Naval Air Squadron. The soap company then merged with another to form Unilever, which is a British multinational corporation headquartered in London. Trump has ties to the company Unilever through the CEO and apparently financial interests, also because they were mentioned on his tax return. The next is Rudyard Kipling, born in 1865 to John Lockwood Kipling, who was the most eminent order of the Indian Empire, which is an order of chivalry founded by Queen Victoria. From childhood, he was raised by a British East India Company Royal Merchant Navy officer and underwent calculated torture, according to him, religious as well as scientific, which made him give attention to the, quote, lies he soon found it necessary to tell, the foundation of his literary effort, according to him. Kipling became a Freemason in 1885 before the usual age of 21, which is typical of the bloodliners. Kipling received degrees of craft masonry, the Mark Master Mason, and Royal Ark Mariner. He was one of UK's most popular writers, awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature. Ashes interred in the Poets' Corner in Westminster Abbey, member of the Royal Society of Literature. Many of Kipling's books had a swastika printed on the cover, based on the Indian sun symbol in Sanskrit, they say. The swastika is an occult symbol that I've covered before. His poems were symbolic of imperialism. That would be British imperialism, and I'll read a couple of those. The first is The White Man's Burden, or Aryan's Man Burden, as I would call it. This is the poem. Take up the white man's burden, send forth the best ye breed. Go bind your sons to exile, to serve your captives' need, to wait in heavy harness on fluttered folk and wild. Your new caught sullen peoples, half devil and half child. The next one is recessional. Far called, our natives melt away, on dune and headland sinks the fire. Lo, all our pomp of yesterday is one with Nineveh and Tyre. Judge of nations, spare us yet, lest we forget, lest we forget. Their pomp is one with Nineveh and Tyre. In the Bible, Nineveh and Tyre are both cities judged by God. God threatened to judge Nineveh. Nahum 3 describes the judgment of Nineveh, calling it the harlot city. After being groomed by the Merchant Navy's officer British East India Company family, Kipling apparently went to stay with another relative, Sir Edward Coley Burne-Jones, 1st Baronet, a member of the Royal Academy of Artists, whose works included The Beguiling of Merlin and some other King Arthur painting. Kipling also wrote Rewards and Fairies, a series of short stories set in historical times. The characters are Dan and Una, two children living in the area of Kipling's own home in Sussex, England, who encounter Puck. And this is Puck, the hairy goat god, who is also the heraldry of the Grand Lodge of England. The stories contain elements of the supernatural as well as history. Kipling also wrote the poem The Vampire. The poem The Vampire was inspired by the painting of Sir Philip Warren Burne-Jones, 2nd Baronet, titled The Vampire. And he was the son of Sir Edward Coley Burne-Jones, 1st Baronet, who Rudyard Kipling went to live with as a child. So he's Rudyard Kipling's cousin. And this is the painting The Vampire. According to some experts, this painting was purchased and is in the possession of one of the Vanderbilt families. I hope this helps explain why the British royalty love and promote their poppies. Thanks for listening.